How are we this fine day? It's a little cloudy, a little rainy. Hopefully everything will be nice and sunny when we have our, I guess it'd be second annual Spring Fest on Saturday. So if you don't know about Spring Fest, we are doing an event here on campus. We do an annual egg hunt, and we're doing yoga as well as am I going to say that? No, not Tai Chi. Qigong, there you go. So the event starts at 9 o'clock on Saturday, so bring your children, have fun. It's going to be a great event. But I want to thank you very much for being here. This is the Spring Staff Advisory Council Town Hall on workplace bullying. My name is Stephanie Umpagan-Cowan. I'm the president of the Staff Advisory Council. I wanted to kind of cover a couple of housekeeping items. If you wanted to please take a moment to silence or turn off your cell phones. That way it's not a distraction to our speaker as well as everyone else who is attending. And also I think most everyone has kind of understood the way we've done lunch today, but we have a gluten-free salad with portobello mushroom, grilled portobello mushroom, and grilled chicken served family style. So that's to create kind of the sense of community and sense of sharing at your table. So if you haven't already started eating, please feel free to do so while I continue to make a few more remarks. Next, I would like to thank our sponsors. I would like to thank the Women's Coalition, the Office of the Chancellor, Graduate School of Professional Psychology, the Health and Counseling Center at the University of Denver, as well as Human Resources. I would also like to thank Sodexo for the meal that we are about to enjoy, as well as Media Services, who is live streaming this event as well as video recording it for those who are unable to join us today. Today's topic is not only very, very important, but it is a pretty sensitive and taboo topic. At the risk of attracting more negative attention, a lot of people do not report instances of workplace bullying. So I'm glad that we have an opportunity today to share in that discussion just with ourselves and with our speaker that I'll be introducing in just a few moments. One thing I do want to let you know is please, please, please be rest assured that we will not be asking anyone to share any personal experiences, whether here or at previous institutions or organizations. That would create a really, really unsafe space, and we want to make sure that we are honoring everyone's safety in a sense. However, at the end of the talk, I will be giving out a resource sheet. It's a double-sided resource sheet, and it's going to give on-campus and online resources of what to do if you are experiencing workplace bullying here at DU or in any other type of organization that you belong. But enough from me. I would like to introduce you to our keynote lunch speaker, Mr. S.L. Young, or more affectionately known as Sly Young. Mr. Young is an author, blogger, project and program leader, business professor, inspirational speaker who writes and speaks about dealing with life, business topics. Mr. Young's books and blogs provide solution-oriented guidance to address challenges such as belief, educational struggles, depression and suicide, ethics, workplace bullying, and much more. Mr. Young is also a founder of the nonprofit organization Saving Our Communities at Risk through Educational Services, which teaches individuals in at-risk communities about life and business and soft skills. In January of 2013, Mr. Young launched his new business called Beyond SPRH, LLC, which provides solution-oriented services to help individuals and organizations maximize output potential. So without much further ado, I'd like to introduce Sly Young.
All right, well, thank you for coming. I appreciate you taking time today to spend a little time with me as we go through a very important topic about workplace bullying. So for today, we're going to cover a lot of topics, and at any time, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me during the presentation. It won't interrupt my flow, or if you want to wait to the end, I'll be available to answer questions at the end as well. So today's discussion, we're going to focus on workplace bullying. What is it? Types of workplace bullying, bad manners, and bad management, bullying tactics and challenges, impacts of workplace bullying, methods to minimize bullying behavior, and then some parting thoughts for you. So let's start with some questions. So have you or anyone that you've known been devalued or dismissed? What about had personal space aggressively violated? What about been or attempted to be convinced to do something inappropriate? What about been verbally attacked or called names? Or been directed to ignore wrongdoings? Anybody? Yeah. Well, all of these things that are up here are things that have happened to me. So the reason that I write about workplace bullying is because I was bullied extensively in the workplace. And a lot of folks will say that bullying is something that you allowed to happen to you because you didn't stand up and fight for yourself or you're weak. It has nothing to do with being weak. Bullying is about the individual and not the target of the bullying. Because I don't like to refer to bullying targets as victims, because we're not victims. We're targets of somebody else's attacks. So let's start with a pop quiz. I'm in a university setting, why not? And I'm a professor, okay? So don't worry, it won't take all that long. Answers will be accepted based on the first hands raised, and then any reasonably close answer will win a special prize, okay? All right. Question number 1. What is a bully? Who's going to do? What's a bully? Who's going to be the first one to volunteer? I might even double down. All right. Ma'am.
Someone who maybe tries to be intimidating with their behavior or words in order to get something, whatever.
Okay, well, for giving it a try, here you go. I'll give you some candy, come on. I don't want to go off camera here since I'm on camera. So there's a packet full of peppermint patties, one of my favorites. So a bully is anyone that uses their power, influence, and control to harass, intimidate, or threaten someone. And bullying does not, bullying targets can be anyone. It could be male, female, teammates, contractors, peers, policymakers, social groups, regulatory. There's a lot of individuals that are bullied. So everybody has the potential to be bullied. But a lot of times we think about bullying as something that happens in the schoolyard, not something that happens at work. Well, unfortunately, too many times, bullies that were in the schoolyard grow up, and then they bring those same types of behavior to the workplace. All right, question number 2. Do organizations' harassment policies address workplace bullying? What do you think? Anyone? I see some heads. Ma'am? Not directly. Why not? All right, come on down. All right? All right. So yeah, organizations usually have policies that deal with harassment and discrimination, but they don't always deal with workplace bullying. Question number 3. You guys should be ready now. We've got 2 questions under our belt. So I'm sure the hands are going to go up now, right? All right. Is workplace bullying legal? And why or why not? So it's a 2-part question. So first, is it legal? And then why or why not?
It is legal in the United States. Oh, sorry.
We have a mic runner here.
I'll quit yelling at you. It is legal in the United States, although California this year did pass a version of an anti-bullying law. So it's known as legalized harassment.
Okay. I'm not familiar with California's, but I am familiar with Tennessee. Tennessee actually did implement a law, but a lot of folks consider the law that was implemented not to be really effective because it really doesn't have any real teeth. So for the most part, workplace bullying is legal across the United States. There might be some jurisdictions that might have some protections, but what we have to look for are for organizations to have policies and procedures that will protect their employees, contractors, or other resources from abuse. Question number 4. Is workplace bullying discrimination? Anyone?
Not unless they're focusing on you because you're a protected class.
Okay. And actually, I forgot to give the gentleman in the back his candy too. So I have two here. So you run on up and get those. All right, thanks. So workplace bullying can be discrimination, but it doesn't have to be. So when it's discrimination, it's because it's against a protected class, whether federally, state, or on a local level. So bullying can be discrimination, but it doesn't have to be. And the final question. Whose responsibility is it to address workplace bullying? Ma'am? Everybody's. Exactly. It's everybody's responsibility to prevent workplace bullying. And it doesn't mean that you have to personally get involved. So a lot of times folks will say, I saw something happen at work, I don't want to get involved. Well, there's ways to get involved without getting directly involved. Because you can let someone in HR know. You can let another manager know. Maybe you have a friend that's just maybe a little bit more bold, and they might be willing to bring up the issue. So you don't have to necessarily get directly involved. You can get indirectly involved. But we don't want to allow anyone to be unnecessarily harassed, intimidated, or threatened. But the other part of this is that if we allow bullying behavior to continue and we don't address it, we become complicit. Because we're saying that in a certain way, it's okay. So would you want somebody to not say something if it was happening to you? So it goes back to that old adage of see something, say something, because it's up to all of us to protect each other. So some things for consideration. So have you heard any of these comments? Bullying doesn't happen at work. If someone bullied you, it's your fault. If you didn't like it, you should have said or done something to stop it. I've never seen anyone bullied at work. Heard any of these? Yeah. All right, so let's look at them. So we take the first one. Bullying doesn't happen at work. Well, that's an opinion about workplace bullying. If someone bullied you, it's your fault. Well, all of a sudden now you're a victim because somebody is doing something to you. If you didn't like it, you should have said or done something. Well, it's your fault because you didn't take action. And I've never seen anyone bullied at work. Again, it's an opinion about workplace bullying. And a lot of times where we get into trouble is when we make judgmental comments without having full facts. That's when we get into trouble a lot. All right, so what do workplace bullies like? Well, workplace bullies, as I like to put it, is they like to hit and they like to leverage their pick. So another way of saying that is that bullies have a need for power, which is legitimate authority within the organization, because sometimes bullies will use their position within the organization or their knowledge about a particular subject matter in order to discriminate or bully. And then influence, an ability to get someone to act or behave in a certain way. Someone might have a certain level of influence over you. They don't have direct control over you, but they have enough connections within the organizations or resources that you might need. So these individuals might have some influence over you. And then there's control, which is the leverage that anyone has over someone else. And there could be a lot of things that could fall into that control category. Position, status, relationships, any of those things. So now we look at some of the tools that bullies use to achieve their goals and objectives. Well, as we've already discussed earlier, harassment. Something that's used to negatively impact someone, whether emotionally or physically. Intimidation, making someone fearful of some type of perceived adverse response is about to happen. So they're intimidating the individual. And I've been in meetings where folks have been asked to contribute, and they go to say something, and then someone says, why did you open your mouth? Why did you say anything? Who asked you your opinion? Might that be a form of intimidation? Might that shut someone down? Does that lead to productive work environments? No. And then threats, making someone feel immediately fearful. And that's one of the worst things that can happen with bullies. At one job that I worked with, I was a contractor, and I was scheduled to manage a big program. In managing this big program, I had responsibility over a huge team. They didn't directly report to me because they had a director on site, but I gave them their day-to-day orders. They weren't used to having somebody telling them what to do. So all of a sudden, here I am telling them what to do. And this gentleman, I went over his desk and asked him to do something one day, and he got up from his desk. As I was standing there, I was within a reasonable distance, and he charged towards me and got in my physical space. And I did this because I didn't know what he was going to do, but what did I know that I was going to do? Protect myself. And then I quickly distanced myself from the situation. But I let my on-site manager know what had occurred, and then the subsequent conversations happened. But do you think that situations like that might change the way that relationship progresses in the future? Yeah, because what am I potentially thinking about? What is this guy going to do the next time I ask him to do something? And could it escalate? So those are the things that we think about. So some of the things that bullies utilize, they use their power, their strength, they can use their pay grade or their status. Intelligence is something that's used a lot, and folks might not think about it, because someone who has a lot of knowledge within the organization can be very, very powerful. And someone who is considered a strategic resource because of what they know, might they be allowed to get away with a lot more? Yeah, because sometimes when we have folks that have a lot of knowledge, we don't want them to leave. We don't want to negatively impact them so that they don't freely share their information, which a lot of times they don't do anyway. We can use achievements or opinions, someone's tenure. I mean, that happens, you know, especially in education environments. Sometimes folks use their tenure. Relationships, personalities can be used as well. So we're just going to do a quick video for you. So this is the way workplace bullying is perceived.
I figure 75% to you, Panma, and 25% divided between the 5 of us. Yida, Crowbar, myself, Tom, and the baby. That makes 5% for each one of us.
Billy, you're cheating yourself. If there's 25% divided among the 5 of you, that's 14% apiece.
Oh, no, listen, Pa. I wouldn't cheat you. You know I wouldn't. Now, look here. I'll show you. Let me rub this out here. And now, 25 divided by 5 is 5. You see, 5 won't go into 2, will it? No. But 5 goes into 25 5 times, you see?
Oh, you're wrong, Billy. Now, I'm a pretty good mathematician. Now, 5 into 25... 5 won't go into 2, will it?
No.
But 5 goes into 5 once. Now, we didn't use the 2 before, so we bring it down here. Now, 5 into 20 goes 4 times. There you are. 5 into 25, 14.
No, look, Pa. Let me prove it to you now by multiplication. 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25.
Really, I'm surprised you're learning.
Huh?
I'm surprised that you're learning. Now I'll show you. 5 times 14 is 25. 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times 1 is 5. 25. That's it.
No, look, Ma. Look, you're wrong there because I'll prove it to you. We'll put down 5 14s here. 14. There. Now I'll prove to you by addition that 5 14s is not 25. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20.
21, 22, 23, 24, 25. There you are. Better brush up, Billy. I don't want to see you boys cheated.
And that's how workplace bullying is sometimes seen. Because workplace bullying is a personal experience that someone has with someone else. So the way that you feel about a bully or workplace bullying might not be the same as how someone else might feel about it. So bullying is how someone feels that they're being treated. And whose responsibility is it to speak up to let someone else know that their behavior might not be appropriate for you? You, right? All right, so another question for you. What types of workplace bullying exist? So let's look at some of the types. Did you want to give me an example? Did I see your hand go up? No. Okay. All right, so the types of bullying behavior that exist: aggressive, dominant, coercive. You can have direct comparing the things that you might be doing to someone else, or treatment that's happening. Embarrassing, trying to embarrass someone. Fear is something that's often used. Sometimes we have passive resistance. Oh, no, this doesn't matter to me, but they're working behind the scenes to undermine what you're doing. Positional, reputational, things that can be unrelated to the situation. And this one I'll stop for just a moment because that might not be something that jumps out to you as being obvious or why I have it up here in terms of the types of bullying behaviors. So when I refer to unrelated, sometimes bullies and bullying behavior that happen in the workplace gets extended outside of the workplace. Okay? Have you ever thought about that? Yeah, because it does happen. And I actually had a scenario where something had happened at an office. So I worked at this consulting assignment, and this woman was, my mom was in the hospital. She had broken her hip. I was doing time in the nursing home, doing time in the office. But this woman who was a sponsor with an organization was writing me all the time unnecessarily about everything that I did. But I just dealt with it because it's just the thing that we do sometimes as consultants. We just deal with it. Because it's easier to deal with it than to deal with it sometimes. But as consultants, the roles aren't necessarily the same. So that didn't bother me. But what bothered me was there was a meeting that had hundreds of people. Either, there was a bunch of people that were in the room, but there were a lot of folks that were on the conference call. And a very senior resource within the organization made a point during the meeting. And do you know what the sponsor said to this lady? Shut up and don't say another word. Nobody in the room or on the phone said anything. I was not going to allow it to I wasn't going to allow it to happen without me saying something because that's just abusive behavior, and there's no reason for it at all. And then I brought it to my management team that I work for. As a consultant, different relationship, but I still felt it was important to stand up, not only for this individual, but for the others who might have been bullied and harassed by this and intimidated by this woman that nobody even knew anything about. And do you know what the management team did when I took it to the management team? Absolutely nothing. And the reason was she was a senior individual in the organization that had a lot of power, and even the senior leadership team, some of them, were intimidated by her. So I did my part to make sure that I brought it to their attention. I can't do anything more than that because I don't run the organization. But what I can do is make it known. And what I also did was I documented it in an email. Might that be important? Yeah, it's important. And the reason that that's important is because now there's a written record that someone has said this is not acceptable behavior. So they can't say, well, we didn't know. Well, you did because someone documented it in an email. And, the other thing real quick is I got a lot of phone calls from individuals saying, thank you for doing that. Because they had dealt with this individual for a long time. And then, the funny thing about, it's not funny, but the interesting thing about this is that I got a phone call from somebody that I used to work with, and they said that the sponsor cried after I identified this issue. But the nice thing about this was, what I heard from follow-up conversations, is that this woman didn't realize that she was being perceived that way. So sometimes, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, bullies don't understand that they're being bullies, okay? So let's just look at some quick statistics from the Society for Human Resource Management. This is from a study that they did back in 2012. 51% of those that were surveyed experienced incidents of workplace bullying. That's a large number. 44% of the organizations surveyed don't have policies that specifically address workplace bullying. 22% don't have a grievance process to investigate bullying allegations. And then 57% don't conduct regular bullying prevention or awareness training. So when you look at the numbers on this slide, it clearly indicates that we have some work to do. And it really isn't all that difficult to make the changes that are required. And we'll talk about some of the changes that organizations. can make and things that individuals can do as well to protect themselves. All right, so what are some of the impacts of workplace bullying? So we have the direct side. So there's an impact to individuals, teams, organizations, and groups. And then from an indirect perspective, the witnesses, those who witness these things that are going on in the organization. Because if I'm witnessing someone being abused, I'm probably not going to speak up as much. I'm probably going to allow some things that I wouldn't otherwise allow to not happen. So then you have your team, groups, and organizations. But when we look at the box that I have here, bullies primarily impact individuals, but also have a negative impact on the company and its culture, customers, competitiveness, but also productivity and effectiveness. Might someone who's being bullied within the organization be impacted negatively in terms of their work performance? You better believe it. So what are some of the reasons for bullying behavior? Abuse of power, need for power. Some folks just like to be in control. And because I have the ability to have control over you, I'm going to use it. And some of them feel really good about it. And you can see it in their faces, right? Disrespect. Some folks just don't care. Just disrespectful individuals, don't care at all. Fun, as I said earlier, you can see it in their face or their faces. Some folks just like to have fun. Bullying folks. And then intimidation. Some folks like to make folks feel intimidated because if I start to get you to cower a little bit, then I have my power and it makes me feel better about myself in a weird way. Lack of training. Some folks just don't know any better because they weren't trained. So not all bullies are bad. They might not have received the proper training. Wanting respect. Some folks take their leadership position as an ability to say, I get respect because I have power over you. And that's the wrong way to think about respect, because respect doesn't come because you have power over someone. The way that I want to be respected is because of my work ethic, because I'm working hard, I'm looking out for my teams, I'm making sure that everybody is treated fairly, and when there's an issue within the organization, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to get the work done. That's how I want to be respected. I don't want anybody to be fearful, intimidated, or harassed by me, because that has nothing to do with management and it has nothing to do with leadership. And then retaliation. Sometimes things happen in organizations and folks will bully you to get back at you. Oh, and the last one there was superiority also. So what are some common questions about bullying? So these are some of the things that you might want to think about when you're trying to determine whether something is bullying or not. Excuse me for just a moment. So one of the questions that we might want to ask is it workplace bullying? Is it bad management? Is it bad manners? Are these mutually exclusive? No, because it could be any or all of them, right? So the answers to any of these questions can be yes. So now let's look at what does this mean a little bit more. So the differences between these. So a bully is someone that intentionally tries to intimidate, harass, or threaten someone, belittle, and any types of other unwarranted behavior. You have a bad manager, it's just someone who just doesn't know any better. Because I know some managers that are really, really good at their job, but they just are a little rough around the edges. And someone might not have ever told them that you don't have to do it that way. So they just need some coaching. And then bad manners, some folks will say, well, if somebody has bad manners, there's nothing that I can do about it because that's just how they've been all of their life and there's nothing that I'm going to do to change that. But no, you can influence someone to change by having a conversation with individuals and letting them know about their behavior. And even if you're not comfortable doing it, you might get somebody else to have that conversation for you to say, whether it's HR, another manager, or someone that's a trusted resource in the organization, to go back and have a conversation with the individual and say, you know what, the way that you've been speaking to folks in meetings and on one-on-one conversations isn't appropriate. So here's some things that we need to do. And then later on in the presentation, we'll talk about some of the things that can be done to help bullies to stop bullying. So for consideration, can bullying be intentional or unintentional? Yeah, it can be intentional or unintentional. So when it's intentional, someone's targeting their actions and their behaviors towards you. It is something that they intend to do. An unintentional bully is just someone that didn't purposely try to do anything to bully you. They just did it through the course of their actions and behaviors. And that's why it's so important that we have ongoing conversations with those that are doing things that we don't like. Because if we don't let folks know that their behavior or actions are not acceptable, how are they ever supposed to know that they need to make a change? Well, what are some of the tactics that are used by workplace bullying? Well, bullies will often, well, I won't say often, but they'll push their agendas, sometimes openly or subtly. They'll override decisions. Have you ever had that happen to you? A team might be working on something and it's like, oh, you have free reign to make all the decisions that you need to make. You make the decision, you said, here's what we're going to do. We're ready to start implementing. No, that's not what we're going to do because that's not what I want you to do, right? This is what I want you to do instead. So it's like, so why are you wasting my time? So if you had a direction that you wanted in the first place, why didn't you tell me what that was up front, and then we could have worked towards that direction versus wasting everybody's time. But sometimes bullies like to use their power, make themselves appear to be more valuable than others, manipulate others to support their views. Have you ever seen that? Yeah, it happens. And then create alliances or develop executive support. So one of the things that I always laugh at when I'm in organizations sometimes is when I go to meetings and we're trying to make decisions, and someone will come in and they'll say, well, you know, X, Y, Z, this individual I had a conversation prior to this meeting, and this is what they think. And so they'll use their relationship with others, and they'll do that name-dropping thing within meetings to make themselves, oh, I just came from a meeting with so-and-so. Oh, well, when I was talking to so-and-so, they said. So that's just another way that bullying can be done, whether intentionally or not. And then sometimes they'll use whatever strategy is necessary to achieve their objectives. Doesn't matter who they hurt, what they do, because the objective is, I'm going to win at any cost. So what might be some examples of workplace bullying in higher education? Since I'm in an education setting, I'll just give you some things to think about. Sometimes that can happen in committee appointments, teaching schedules. And I'm not going to go into details on these. I'm a professor, so I know these things. Pay raises and promotions. Performance evaluations. Research time approved. Tenure appointments. Training opportunities. And obtaining visibility. So those are some things that might happen in higher education. So what are some challenges with working with a workplace bully? Well, bullies can create or cause any of the following: unnecessary stress within the organization or for individuals. Defensive mechanisms to be heightened. Have you ever been around a bully or been the target of a bully, and and it's like all of a sudden when you're walking on eggshells every time that you come around that individual. So that's not a great place to be, because we spend the majority of our time at work. Do you want to be in an environment where you're feeling that way? And do you really think that a lot of organizations really want their employees to be fearful, intimidated, or threatened, or harassed? I think it happens in a lot of organizations, but I don't think organizations want that, because organizations really, I think for the most part, want the best for their employees. But sometimes, through the layers of management, things don't make it up to the executive level to say, these are some of the issues that are within our organization that need to be addressed. Uncomfortable work environment, trying to appease the bully to prevent future attacks. So if I'm spending time trying to appease the bully versus doing what I'm supposed to be doing, what is that impacting? My performance and the organization's performance as well, because it can have, the verbal insults, the mental, and the emotional aspects of that. And then sometimes decisions always need to be validated against the bully's viewpoint, because you know that this bully is going to act out if a decision's made or you offer an opinion. Sometimes the easiest way to work around the bully is to make an alliance with the bully. So I've had bullies in organizations that I've worked with, and I knew no matter what decision that we came up with, there was going to be an issue. There was going to be a fight. So what I started to do was I would have conversations with the bully before I had conversations with the team. Might that be an effective strategy? Sometimes. But if I dealt with the issues that were important to the bully prior to taking it to the team where I would get shut down in front of the team, then it minimized the opportunities for that to happen in the future. And it shows that I'm willing to partner with the bully. And it makes all the difference in the world. I actually had a guy that I worked with. We worked at a company, and they were a contractor for our organization. It was interesting how much power they had as a contractor for our organization. They had more power than the employees of the organization. And so this gentleman had an abrasive personality, liked to yell and scream. And so when I started working on this particular initiative, he actually showed up, and I was like, oh boy, I got to work with him again. So I just dealt with it, and I minimized my interactions with him, used email a lot because it just was easier. But then what happened was my team worked in a different location than where I was working. So what happened was I went down to where my employees were because they said that they were having these issues. And I was just going down there to get some additional information because I wanted to know what was going on. Because if I'm going to address the issue, I want to know specifics. Do you know what happened as I walked into the door leading to the conference room that they were all huddled in? Guess who I heard yelling and screaming? The individual that they were complaining about. And it was great for me because it gave me an opportunity to, one, to hear it firsthand, and two, to address it immediately. Because I walked into the room and I said, excuse me, stop the conversation, and said, I need to speak with you. And then we walked down the hall and we went into a conference room to have a different conversation. And I let him know very clearly that it is not his responsibility to yell at my team. If there's an issue with my team's performance, I will deal with that issue. It is your job to identify the issue so that I can deal with it in the manner that I see best. And by the way, I don't yell and scream at my teams because I don't find that to be an effective form of management or leadership. So that was one thing that I did. And then I did something else. You have any ideas of what else I might be able to do to improve that relationship? Because we had that previous history at another company. Now, we now have a situation where he's intimidating my team. And now, is there something else that I might be able to do? Well, yeah, there is. So what I did was, I would have outings with my team because my team was working hard. So occasionally, they were working hard, and it was a hot day. I would come by, and we'd go down to get some ice cream. I'd buy them ice cream. Nothing major, but those little things do matter. But I also would buy them drinks, and we would go to happy hour occasionally. So on one occasion, guess what I did? I invited this individual to happy hour with us. Didn't know how it was going to go, but we sat there, and he was amongst my team, and we all had a good time. And then that clearly identified to me that it wasn't a personality issue. It was a work issue. And we were protecting our respective organizations. Sometimes the battles were, really down and dirty. Well, not down and dirty, but they were fierce, okay? But once we broke bread, the relationship changed. And from that moment on, we had a better working relationship. So sometimes we can look beyond the obvious. So sometimes stepping away from the environment that you're in and going to somewhere, it could be the cafeteria, it could be a library at work, it could be going out for coffee, it could be going out for lunch, it could be going out for drinks. sometimes when we remove ourselves from the immediate environment so that we're on neutral ground, it makes a difference. So a lot of times folks will be more willing, and they'll sometimes relax. They'll be more willing to have a conversation, and sometimes they'll relax. And then workplace bullying can create an atmosphere of fear, and we don't want to have that. So what are some methods that we can use to deal with workplace bullying? So this is information that was taken from a survey of about 2,000 respondents. So this is what a lot of folks did. And didn't I say that I did this too? Right? So we stay away from them. 64% of 2,000 people said, we're going to stay away from them, because that's the easiest strategy. It's not the best strategy for the organization, but that's the approach that folks take. How about this one? Vent about them to others, 58%. How many of you have done it? Uh-huh. No, I've done it. I've done it also. But that really doesn't do any good because you don't resolve the issue. But what does this do within the organization? There's two things that it does. One, gossip. And we know how that rumor mill works, right? As soon as you get that news on the phone, on email, texting, sending folks information. But the other thing that happens is, what if there's this hot issue or something happened with a workplace bullying in an organization, and now everybody is gossiping and venting about it? What's not happening? Work. So we want to address these issues timely. All right, so avoid working with them on projects. You know, when you have control over your project schedule, that's great. But when somebody else is assigning you to the projects, and you're like, please, 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 no, not this project, no. So, you know, that's not an effective strategy all the time. And then plan to quit or have thought about quitting. And I'm surprised that this number is only 48%. Because what I have found through my extensive writing and having conversations with individuals and my own personal experience is that a lot of times when folks are in organizations and they're being bullied, what happens to the targeted individual of the bullying? They leave. And when they leave, what do they often not do? Say anything. Because there's a lot of reasons for that. Because what? You want a good referral. Your performance review still might be hinged on maybe 6 months of their assessment, right? So there are so many things that can be impactful. So what we do as targeted individuals, we quietly pack all of our belongings and we leave the organization. And who loses? Who loses when that happens? Everybody. And we'll talk about some of that too. So engage in dysfunctional workarounds to avoid the problems with the bullies, 45%. So I can't stand working with this bully this much that I'm going to, instead of working with you, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on you for a moment. Instead of working with you, you're my bully, I'm going to go back there and have a conversation with her, and I'm going to tell her, this is what I want you to tell her. And then when you get the response, you email or you call me, and then I'll tell you what to say. How crazy is that? And sometimes organizations don't want to deal with this. All right, so let's look at some additional statistics on workplace bullying. 96% of the individuals that were surveyed, this is the same survey of 2,000 respondents, 96% of those surveys said that they have witnessed some form of bullying at work. I just find that number to be incredibly high, but I'm also not surprised by it. Because you think about the longevity of folks that are working in organizations, whether it happens here or somewhere else at the beginning of your career, there's a lot of different forms. You can have peers that try to bully you. You can have supervisors and managers who try to bully you. You can have vendors who try to bully you. Have any of you ever been bullied or attempted to be bullied by a vendor? All right. So since I didn't get a lot of hands there, I'll tell you a quick story so that you can understand this. Or first I got to take a drink. So, you know, exactly. The water thing, I was like, I normally talk a lot faster than this, so this might be good for me to come practice out here. It keeps me like calm a little bit. Because I really have to pace myself, so if I keep drinking water, just bear with me. I'm also working up a sweat, and it's not the lights in here. All right. Oh, I need one more drink, sorry. So this is what happened. So I was working on a strategic initiative. And as part of this strategic initiative, I would meet with the vendor. So there were a team of us that we would regularly meet with the vendor. And this was a very, very important initiative for the organization. So we worked late into the nights a lot of times. Sometimes we didn't go home until 10, 11 o'clock at night because we were working so hard on this project. And sometimes we would pay. Sometimes the vendor would pay. And I didn't think it was that big of a deal because we were working on a project. And so what I decided to do one time is, because I was busy, I stopped having the dinners as often, and I wasn't around them as frequently. And then there was an end of the quarter deal that came up. And their account manager came in and said, I need your assistance to get this through. And I said, I will see what I can do, but I'm not going to do anything extraordinary. So I will do things that are customary. Do you know that his senior executive came to visit me shortly thereafter? And do you know what the senior executive did? He said, we spent a lot of money on those dinners. We expect better from you. So it does happen with vendors too. I still didn't do anything more than I was going to do, but I also let my vice president know about what happened. And then from that moment on, I realized that I couldn't have that close of a relationship with vendors. And this was before we had Sarbanes-Oxley and a lot of these other things that were going on. So you have to be careful about that. But let's continue to move on. All right. So work with someone who is sarcastic, cutting, demeaning, or offensive, 46%. Do you think someone being sarcastic or demeaning to you is a form of bullying? It can be, especially when it happens over and over and over and over and over again, right? And then works with someone who spreads gossip, negative rumors, or other misinformation to hurt others. Have you ever heard or seen or witnessed someone who has taken some information and spread it about someone that folks knew that it wasn't correct, but they were trying to hurt somebody else for their own personal gain? Yeah, that happens. And it happens more times than not because, unfortunately, I think too many times these days we're in this culture that's win-win. And in order for me to win, actually, I take that back, win-lose. So in order for me to win, you've got to lose. So if I need to do something to undermine what you're doing so that I can get that promotion, then I'm going to do those type of things. And that type of manipulation is really harmful to organizations, and we need to be very careful about that. So workplace bullying is costly. So now let's look at some of the costs that are associated with bullying. So in this survey, 1 in 5 respondents estimated that they lose 7 or more hours a week due to bullying at work. 7 or more hours a week. That's a lot of time. So we take that and we extrapolate the information, and then we say, and we project it out into the future. So if we have a salary of $55,000 and then convert it to an hourly rate of $26.44, and then a weekly cost of $185.08, and then multiply that times 52, we're estimating that that cost per impacted resource is about $10,000. So imagine when you start to multiply this across an organization of 100 people, in an organization that you have a senior leader that's a tyrant. It can be very painful. It can be very costly for the organization. So we would expect that laws would provide additional protection, right? So do our laws cover us and protect us from workplace bullying? No? Yes? Maybe? So some of the arguments that are made about workplace bullying and protections and the reasons that we don't need them is that harassment policies cover workplace bullying. And we've seen from some of the numbers that that's not the case, because harassment policies don't always address workplace bullying specifically. What a lot of harassment policies will do is they will cover discrimination related to a protected class. And then targeted to provide discrimination protection. And then laws protect workers from discrimination in hostile work environments. So some folks will say that. Well, the other issue is if you're working in a state that's at will, that you can be terminated or you can leave at any time for any reason with or without cause. Might that be a powerful motivator to remain quiet? Now, let me just tell you something. A lot of times organizations won't allow this to happen. But the possibility that it could keeps folks sometimes from speaking up. And then laws are typically directed to protect certain classes again. And then companies without workplace bullying policies leave their workers at risk, and oftentimes without legal remedies. So I'm going to tell you another quick story, and I write about this in one of my articles. There was a gentleman that worked in a northern dealership, and he had a tie on to support the team that he liked. And he went to work with the tie on, and the dealership manager said, "Take that tie off. We don't support that team here." And he said, "I like this team. I'm keeping my tie on." And the manager went on to say, "Take the tie off." And he said, "No, I'm not." And then the conversation went on and on. And then what happened was the guy was fired. Now, some folks might say, well, it was insubordination. But yeah, technically it could be insubordination. But he was fired because he was wearing an opposing team's tie. And it was perfectly legal. Perfectly legal. And there was another situation that happened in the area that I live in, and this is where someone can be bullied from an external source, not necessarily a vendor, not even somebody who's directly connected with the business. So there was a dentist, and he had this assistant who was very attractive. And his wife didn't like this attractive assistant working with the dentist. And she made it very clear that he needed to get rid of her. So what did he do? He terminated her. And she tried to file a lawsuit for wrongful termination, and she lost. Because a lot of times when we don't have these protections, because a bully can say, as long as it's not part or related to a protected class, I can say, "Oh, ma'am, is that a form of brown, that suit you have on?" "Well, I don't like brown. You're fired." And I legally could do that. But a lot of times it won't happen. Organizations won't allow that to happen. But it could legally happen. So where we ultimately need to get to is to have laws that protect everyone. Because when we don't have laws that protect everyone, then what we find are instances where folks work around the law. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So an illustration of an effective law. So sexual harassment laws weren't always on the books. And there were a lot of folks that fought vehemently against sexual harassment laws. They're like, we don't need any laws to mandate or to deal with any of this. But it has prevented lots of women from being harassed, and also men, because men can be sexually harassed as well. Then provided legal solutions for someone to seek remedies. So if you're being bullied at work right now, and bullying can have very harmful effects on individuals emotionally, psychologically, so there can be a cost that's associated with it. But unfortunately, there aren't any real legal protections to protect individuals. And that's why there's organizations like the Workplace Bullying Institute that are working on the Healthy Workplace Bill in a lot of different states around the country so that we can have greater protections, because nobody should be fearful of these types of things at work. And then the most important thing that it did was it served notice to these companies that this behavior will not be allowed. Because companies that know that they can be sued and held financially or civilly, sometimes liable, might that be a powerful motivator to do things a little bit differently? Yeah. So generally speaking, the EEOC provides protections against discriminatory activities and behaviors as long as you're part of a protected class. But individuals that aren't part of these protected classes, sometimes they're left with a hope and sometimes a prayer for moral and ethical protection against these individuals within organizations. So one of the articles that I wrote last year that got a lot of response, I wrote an article that's entitled, "Is Workplace Bullying the New Discrimination?" Because what happens sometimes is that individuals won't discriminate because you're a woman, or you're a man, or a female, or you're pregnant, or you have religious views. They'll find other reasons to work around those protections. So I had wrote this article about that just to raise awareness, because workplace bullying can be substituted as a substitute for discrimination because there aren't the legal protections and remedies. The other thing is discrimination today isn't as overt as it used to be. Because the things that are used for discrimination now, so when you look at the EEOC, they look for, did someone call you these certain words? We don't need to use any of them, right? Or did they use certain symbols or gestures? Those are the things that they're using as a litmus test. Well, that's outdated because folks know better. They know where that line is, and they'll go right up to that line and not step over. And so that's why we need some changes in the laws. And the bad thing is, and I'm sure some of you, a lot of you have seen this, have seen bullying behavior in plain sight. And it just happens, and then you're just like, oh, I'm not going to get involved. And then, again, the at-will employment. So let's look at the status of the Healthy Workplace Bill. That was what I had referred to just a moment ago. So 8 states have introduced a bill this year to have a healthy workplace. 31 jurisdictions have actually introduced a healthy workplace bill over the last few years. 29 states and 2 territories. And then one state where we had referred to it earlier, Tennessee passed a bill. However, many analysts find that that bill is ineffective because it really doesn't have any remedies or real penalties to it. So it's really more words on a sheet of paper versus actually being something that's actionable. So what are some of the impacts that bullies can have on the victims? Absenteeism. Some folks don't think about death, but death can happen. You're stressed out. Folks have heart attacks sometimes. Employee dissatisfaction. Impact on morale. Bullies have a huge impact on morale within the organization. Insomnia, losing sleep, job loss, lost employee, mental well-being, reduced or lost productivity, sloppy work, sickness, stress, suicide, transference, and then weight loss or gain. And then there's a lot of other impacts. Have you ever thought about any of these things or the majority of these things as potential impacts that a workplace bully can have on someone? So bullying's impact on organization, these are some of the ways that it impacts. Culture. So if the leadership team is using bullying as their strategy for leadership and management, what happens all the way down in the organization sometimes? Folks will follow the behavior or the culture within the organization. Ethical decision making. Folks can bully folks into doing things that are inappropriate. Employee performance. How about successful project delivery? Sometimes bullies can have impact on a team's ability to successfully deliver a project. I had a particular project that I was working on. I was a consultant on this project. I was told to put together a project schedule. I put together the project schedule based on my conversations with the team members in the various organizations to figure out what we felt like we could make and we could achieve. Not like we could take the whole year to get it done, but what we could do without cutting corners and doing it in a quality fashion. So then we put together the schedule, and then a senior vice president said, nope, you need to cut off a month off the schedule. So then we went and we reduced the schedule by a month. And then we took it in again. Nope, I know you can do better than that. So now we need to cut off another month or two off the schedule because we just need to figure out what we need to do to get this done. Well, what happens when you're being forced to make these changes to schedules is that now you're creating schedules that are unrealistic, which leads to unnecessary stress, rework, and other issues within the organization. So what ultimately happened on this particular project is we were told to deliver it, I think it was in June. Guess when the project got delivered? It was November or December, which actually reflected the original timeline that we had set out anyway. Company performance, and then the ability to have a happy and healthy work environment. Wouldn't it be nice if you went to work every day and you're like, man, this is the greatest place on earth to work, right? You know, there's places like that outside of Disney, right? And then, what are some of the reasons that bullies win? So let's talk about the reasons that bullies get away with it. They isolate the target. So they won't bully you in front of everybody else, but once they know that they have you behind a closed door and nobody else is watching, game's on. They use their authority to control the target because sometimes we're fearful of those that have power, especially if they're a couple levels up from us, that we'll just allow things to happen. They convince a target that it's their fault. It's your fault that this is happening. It had nothing to do with me if you would have done what you were supposed to do. Use demeaning behaviors or attacks. Innuendos used to predict negative outcomes. Convince the impacted to not report the incidents. And that actually happens a lot. And it doesn't have to be the bully. Sometimes it's folks that you work with. You know if you report this, you know what's going to happen. Well, that's why they don't report it, right? Nothing's going to happen, or there could be some bad things that happen, right? And then permissive leaders or organizational culture. And that's primarily the reason that a lot of bullying occurs, because it's allowed to occur. The executive team is not taking a very forceful position within the organization to say, we will not allow bullying behavior to happen in this organization. And if it does happen, we will deal with it promptly. And then the rules don't apply to superstars. And then laws don't protect us against workplace bullying. And that's why we need to have changes. So what are some of the organizational costs associated with workplace bullying? So we have sickness and absenteeism. So it leads to delayed work, lost productivity, disability. Lost employees. So we have to recruit additional employees. We've got to onboard them. We've got to train them. And that's for the individual who's being trained as well as those who have to train them. We have organizational brain drain and the ramp-up time. This piece right here can be a significant cost if you have a lot of folks that are cycling in and out of the organization. And then productivity and efficiency. Slow work, rework, reduced quality, negative customer responses or outcomes. So what are some of the reasons that bullying isn't reported more? Culture is one of the biggest factors, because if I don't think anything's going to change, to your point, then I'm not going to say anything. I deal with it or I leave. Fear. Job loss. Perception. And that's one of the biggest things and related to workplace bullying targets, because what we hear about targets is there's a perception that somebody is weak. And we need to get rid of that type of thinking. Because if something is happening to someone and they are feeling that it's not appropriate behavior or actions directed toward them, we all have the right to say, this doesn't work for me. This bothers me. And weakness should not be a perception that we have to worry about. Process. Sometimes we don't even know what the process is to report someone who is bullying us. Retaliation might be a fear that we might have. And then lack of clarity about rights. What rights do I actually have within this organization to stand up and protect myself? Well, let's look at company responsibility. So these are some things that companies should do. First and foremost, we want to demonstrate respect and fair treatment for all resources, regardless of their classification. We want to create behavioral policies and standards and procedures for appropriate conduct, including workplace bullying. We want to enforce any policies timely. And the quicker we respond to it, the quicker it is to let it go, get rid of it. Because we've got to enforce the policies, we've got to be fair about it, but we also have to make sure that individuals that are part of the process or the investigation are not retaliated against. Because if folks are being retaliated against after they've reported something, once it happens to one, it happens to all. So the others then remain quiet and silent. Discuss behavioral expectations within each manager's team at least once a year. And this is something that not just about dealing with interpersonal relationships within organizations. I also think we need to talk about ethics a lot more in organizations as well. So we need to have more than a once a year conversation about things that are going on. Sometimes we're afraid in organizations to deal with those touchy-feely things. And those are the things that, once we deal with them, can lead to more productive organizations. And then we want to review our policies within the companies and these organizations at least annually to determine if any updates are required. What have we learned from the past year? Do we need to make any changes? So what are some things that individuals can do? So now let's focus on the individual. Well, first thing, you should become familiar with the types of bullying behaviors. Because if you're aware of the types, because sometimes things that happen to us, we might not think of it as being a bullying behavior, or we're just so used to it that we're just like, it doesn't impact us. So if you're familiar with the types of bullying behavior, you'll know when it happens. You want to review your company policies, because you should know what your protections are, so if a bullying incident or anything else happens in the organization, that you can address it. You also want to make sure that you communicate to the bully that the behavior isn't acceptable, won't be tolerated, and will be reported. Do you think that that might be an important first step? Yeah, because you're putting the bully on notice. And even if you aren't comfortable having that type of conversation with the bully, find someone who is. They can do it on your behalf, whether it's a manager on your team, manager on another team, or HR, because that's what they're there for. And we want to make sure that we report any incidents of bullying. Because if we don't report it, if you suffer in silence, there's probably other folks that are suffering in silence also. So we need to speak up and let folks know about what's going on as soon as possible. And then one of the most important things that you want to do is keep a record. And not only keep a record at work, but keep a record in an off-site location as well. Because when someone comes back to you and says, tell me specifically what happened, and then you're trying to recall what happened 3 months ago and 6 months ago, if things are happening that you're not comfortable with, write it down. It happened on this date, at this time, these were the individuals involved, these were folks that are potential witnesses, and this is specifically what happened, and this is what the outcome was. So now you have a record that you can refer back to. So we have to understand that bullies aren't intentionally bad. Not always. Because sometimes they just don't understand that their behavior is bullying, because they just haven't been taught any better. They imitate the behavior of other bullies that they've witnessed. So if I'm looking up to a leader within the organization and they're getting things done and they're bullying everybody to get it done, and they're my role model, guess what I'm probably going to do with my folks too? The same type of behavior. Unknown pressures inside or outside of work. How many of you have had a bad day because something happened at home or inside the work? I mean, we've had that. So everybody isn't going to be perfect every day. Case in point, I went to go see a senior director one day, and I went to his executive assistant. And I said, hey, I need to speak with. And within a matter of seconds, what she did was she said, you don't know everything that's going on in this room. All right, I'll come back later. Because what more was I going to say after that? Because obviously she was having a bad day. And so she was not a bad person. I mean, very, very nice woman. But something was obviously wrong on that day, and it was not the time to have a conversation. Confuses abusive behavior for leadership. We talked about that earlier. Believes that threats and intimidation will improve or drive results. So if I say, if you don't get this done, if you don't stay here tonight and get this done and deliver it, you're not going to get X or Y and Z. And so do you think that that really motivates you? How about if I said, hey, you know what? I know we've got a lot going on right now, but I really need you to work late this week. What days do you have available so that we can work with your schedule and work with mine at the same time and meet the organizational goals? Which one would you prefer? And then never receive proper management training. Sometimes we put individuals in positions without training them how to be managers and what it means to be a good manager. And being a good manager means you have to have emotional intelligence, okay? Right? So we are all creatures that have needs and emotions, and we need to be able to manage those. Because you're never going to have a team that everybody's all the same. So you need to be able to deal with that. It's funny in my classroom, I tell my students, I'll give you an example of emotional intelligence. As you can probably tell, as I do my presentation, I'm very big about looking around the room here, and occasionally I've connected with you. I probably should have told you that up front. I just do that. And so in my classroom, I tell my students, I said, don't be surprised if I call on you because I'm emotionally intelligent. Because you don't know this, but there's a question mark that lights up on your face. And being able to be emotionally intelligent to understand whether someone is confused, they need some help, or they're having a bad day, those are things that we not only do as individuals, but the higher you go up in the organization, you need to become better at doing that. But the other things that we don't want to do, and this happens sometimes in technical organizations, because we have individuals that are really, really smart technically, and they probably don't, some of them don't have really good interpersonal skills, but we promote them to management anyway. Because we don't have another track that's available. And the only way for them to receive that pay or promotion is to put them in a management position that they probably should never have in the first place, nor do they probably want. Because some of the real technical guys say, just leave me back, where nobody can see me, and then I'll just work on what I need to. All right, so how do we help workplace bullying? So we help workplace bullying. Some of the ways that we can do it is counseling. We counsel them to make them better employees. Because sometimes, again, they don't know. And then we have to be specific. We can't go to a bully and say, well, last week you were acting this way, and, a month ago you were doing it this way. No, be very specific about the behavior that you want them to correct. So I heard you talking to Jim. And while you were talking to Jim, you were using inappropriate language, and that's not something that we're going to allow in the organization. When you get in those situations in the future, if you think that it's a heated situation, what you need to do is to maybe step away from that conversation at that particular moment and then come back to it. Or, if you're capable, go ahead and have a conversation with the individual in a way that doesn't inappropriately call them out of their name. Mentoring. Mentoring programs are great. So being able to have mentors within the organization are great. And just a quick aside, I like to have several different types of mentors. I like to have a mentor outside of the organization that I'm working in. I like to have a mentor that's within my specialty. I like to have a mentor that is within that overarching scope of the things that I'm doing. So maybe I am a cost accountant, so I want to have someone to mentor me as a cost accountant, but I also might want to have somebody who's an accountant in general to mentor me as well. And then I also want to have someone, if I can, at an executive level that can help mentor me and develop me at the same time. Training, and this is something that we need to do from day one when individuals come into an organization. We need to train them about workplace bullying, what it is, what are the types, what do we do about it in the organization, how do you prevent it if it happens to you, what our policies and procedures cover, so that folks have clarity about their rights. Because when individuals don't have clarity about their rights, then they sometimes suffer in silence. Termination. Sometimes the best thing that we can do is to allow the bully to go somewhere else. Because if that's not the culture that you want to have, and this individual is dominating intimidating, harassing, threatening individuals and making the environment unproductive, then what we may need to do is say, you know what, this environment just doesn't work for you. And then help them to transition. All right, so starting to summarize here. So we need to understand the bullying types and strategies to deal with inappropriate behavior. And we've covered some of those. You want to address any unwanted or concerning behaviors as soon as possible to prevent future attacks. You want to document any behavioral concerns or issues. Discuss the concerns with a trusted individual to release stress. Because when we've got all that building up inside of us, it affects us negatively. And then we want to seek guidance from trusted and respected resources. And that can be someone inside or outside of the organization. And then, if you're interested in finding some additional information on workplace bullying, I have 2 books that are available. The one is Bullies, they're in your office too. Could you be one? This is, details the types of bullies. It has case studies with specific examples. Doesn't have the name of the individuals or organizations in it. But it has specific examples. It has questions for critical thinking, and then it has recommendations. And then the other book is just a bunch of articles about workplace bullying that I've written as well. And then just a little bit of acknowledgments. First and foremost, I want to thank Stephanie Cowan for inviting me to come in and speak. It's been very delightful working with her, as well as Lindsay Anderson. They've made this entire experience very painless for me, and I really very, very, very much appreciate that. And just some parting thoughts for you. So no one should ever have to deal with, tolerate abuse of any kind, condescending or any type of unwanted behavior. Life is too short to have to deal with that, and we have a lot of things that we can be doing outside of work, and if we are stressed and we're allowing this to emotionally, physically impact us at work, guess where else it impacts us? Outside of work at home, and it impacts our families as well. Issues that aren't addressed or reported can needlessly continue. So we've got to figure out a way to report it. Even if we can't do it ourselves, we have to find a way to report the things that are going on. Because what I always like to say is, if you're thinking about a question or if something is happening to you, it's probably happening to someone else. And then, if organizations don't protect the resources within the organizations, it's ultimately your responsibility to protect yourself. And then if you want to contact me later, there's my contact information for my company Beyond SPRH, my personal website and information, and then if you want to look at any of my articles out on my blog. And I thank you for all of your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. We will have some time for Q&A if there are any questions that you want to ask. Oh, okay, great. So as we're doing the Q&A, I'll be passing around the resource sheets to each table.
Oh, and one other thing. If you were one of the individuals that answered a question earlier and got some candy, I actually brought a couple of my books. I didn't have any of the bully books with me, but I have some of my other books. So if you want to stop by and see me afterward, I'll give you a selection of some of my books. And then if I have any extra, if you happen to still be in the room, I'll be willing to give them away so I don't have to carry them back with me. All right?
Question?
Hi. I had a question about if you notice bullying happen in certain organizations more than others. And I asked that because I practiced law before coming into higher ed, and I was in a law firm. And it's reading this, it's very apparent that happens to associates, and it's part of the culture. And I don't know if you had any experience with the legal profession and if it's more common in that area or not.
Well, I haven't had any experience with the legal profession, so I can't address that specifically. But what I will tell you is that I've worked in a lot of different organizations and a lot of different industries. And when I was working as an employee in big companies, it did not happen as much because there was a lot more protection. When I started working for the smaller companies and I started working as a consultant, because as a consultant, I wasn't an employee, so I wasn't protected. So as a consultant, you could be let go without any type of notice at all. And so it's a powerful motivator to remain silent. But in other areas where I saw a lot more bullying is in areas where there were more high-tech or a lot of pressure and stress and short deadlines to turn things around. Sir?
I had a question. I'd heard of a term managing up, where if you have either an abusive or just negligent or just bad manager, that you then sort of build that relationship there instead of perhaps taking, if it's something that's really bothering you, that you've either want to take to HR or not, but there are ways of sort of helping your manager become a better manager and be aware of what they're doing. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I totally believe in managing up because my job as an employee is to manage my manager. And my job as an employee is to make my manager look the best that they can possibly look. And what I have found through my experiences is when I make my manager look good and they're getting acknowledgments about what's going on in the organization, it makes everybody better, right? So what I always like to do is, it's easy to manage up when things are going well, but when there's these difficult conversations, I like to caution folks to tread a little lightly because you sort of need to feel out that manager, because some managers will be open and receptive to saying, okay, you can tell me anything that's going on. Some will tell you that and say, just anything that's bothering you, come in, we'll have a closed-door conversation, and then we'll modify things. But then you'll have some that will say the same things, and then they'll use it against you later. So you have to sort of figure out the individual that you're dealing with. And then if you're dealing with one of the individuals that it's a more threatening environment or it's going to be an uncomfortable situation, then that's when I would feel more comfortable. And I wouldn't necessarily go to their manager first. I don't think that that's the appropriate, you can do what you want to, but I don't think that that's the appropriate path. What I would do is get an HR partner to come in and have a conversation to just sort of help facilitate it. While we're waiting for the mic to come up, I also have my cards up there on the table, so if you're interested on your way out, you can grab one of my cards.
I'm interested in some of the psychological studies that might have been done, if you know of any, in terms of the childhood patterns that bullies tend to have. So whether do studies show that workplace bullies tend to have had either physical or verbal abuse in their family of origin? And then also, are there studies about what workplace bullies are like at home? Does that carry on into the personal life?
I don't have a lot of information on specific studies, but what I will tell you is if someone has grown up and that has been the behavior that they've been, exhibited over their lifetime, it's not going to change when they get into the workplace. So I haven't seen any specific surveys such as that, but I think individuals can come into the organization with that type of mentality, so that they have bullying behavior, but I also think it's learned behavior too, because if you're in an organization that allows it, or you're working with individuals, because sometimes bullies just target certain individuals because they know that they can get away with it. So if I'm a bully and I'm targeting you and you don't say anything, I'm going to keep doing it, and that's an unfortunate situation.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you have any stats on men versus women being bullied.
I don't, but I'll check into that, and I'll follow up with Steph. You have to remind me on that so I don't forget. Yeah, but I'll check into that, and we could follow up. Any other questions? Did you have it? No. All right, I think that's it. Thank you.